those of you who have the 4th edition or the 3rd edition of the Norton Anthology, Sunjata begins or is immediately different in the way it's laid out. These are 2 different translations, but it's not just the translation issue in terms of the language. The whole format is different. I will point out that it's very important to remember that this is an oral work of literature, meaning it's really not literature. Literature means reading. Yeah?
Is that just like to talk about it?
Sure. Do you have something to do formally?
I just got a little summary.
Okay, give me a second on that then. We have come across oral stuff before. We saw some patterns in Gilgamesh. We certainly saw some patterns in the Iliad. We talked about them and how this is the way cultures in many parts of the world preserve their history and promote their art just through storytelling. And so over time, certain characteristics of oral storytelling start to arise. And bearing that in mind is kind of important because it determines an awful lot about the form of what you're reading. And sometimes when you're coming up against something that is strange or a little bit different, it helps to be able to understand it as part of, well, this is just the convention that they're doing with oral storytelling. In this case, I'm going to ask, who has 3rd edition? Okay. In the back. We're going to do a little dramatic reading here. I want you to read the words along the right-hand column. And by words, I mean word, because it's all the same word.
What is the page?
I am on page 15, right at the start. For those of you following along.
So what do you want me to say? This Namu?
Yep,
Namu?
that's it. Namu, which is my understanding. I am not fluent in this language, but my understanding it is a word of approval. It's roughly equivalent to saying yes. So, you say you want to know about Mandan?
Namu.
For us to give you many details about Mandan?
Namu.
With which part of Mandan will we start?
Namu.
We will start with Sunjata's father.
Namu.
Who is Faroko Manko Farakadin?
Namu.
The name of Sunjata's father is?
Namu.
Manko Farakin of Kanfara.
Namu.
Do you know where Fankara is?
Namu.
Kanfara is. It is on the frontier between Guinea and Mali,
Namu.
at a place known as the Coromale,
Namu.
a swampy area where the Coromale people dig their gold mines. It is known as Kanfara.
Namu.
You see how we're going through this. What's that? Yeah, it's like a song. Literally. It has that rhythm because it is being punctured every now and by then. You've got this steady rhythm back and forth. It is like a song, and that helps it be memorable. Because remember, if this is oral storytelling, this isn't as long as the Iliad, but it's pretty long. And to memorize all this is going to take a little bit of that's going to take some doing, I'm going to imagine. So it helps to have a song-like capacity. And this is not just a song. We can recognize another pattern in it. Call and response, where I say something and you say something back to me. You have to imagine the entire audience saying Namu. I say something, the audience says something back. I say something, the audience says something back. Those of you who go to church on Sundays will recognize that Amen plays largely the same role in a Christian church service, where you can get great participation among the people saying something back. This brings everybody into the act. It's very hard to sit in the back benches and just, listen to what's going on. Yeah. If you have to play a role, if you have to jump in and provide a voice, if you have to join the chorus, it involves you. Now, this does a couple of things. This makes it more fun, more lively. It is very hard to just sort of sit back and, I don't know how good that is, if you are jumping in and having fun with it. So it makes it more entertaining. But it also helps memory. Not just for the person who is sitting there trying to memorize it, but for everybody who is in the audience. They are learning this way. In an oral culture, this is how information gets passed down. And you get better retention, shall we say, if there is participation. I do my best up here to not just lecture you guys for 3 hours and 45 minutes in a stretch. I try and give opportunities where I can ask a question or two, get you to buy into the process in the hope that it'll be easier for you to recall some of it. You will get more out of the experience if you're involved, if you have a little skin in the game. You will retain the information a little bit better. And so, it becomes a little more dynamic. Because sometimes when you say Namu, perhaps you're going to put a little spin on it. Maybe you're going to give it a little sarcastic tone. Namu. Or Namu! Really energetic. Yeah! I had 5 Red Bulls before I sat down for this, and I'm going to enjoy this. Namu! The tone can change. The audience feedback will be different. Anybody who's been to a concert where at a certain point the guy on stage points the mic out at the crowd, knows that they're going to sit there and chime in their own way. Often with the words that he has already, written himself for a chorus, but they're going to put a little spin on it perhaps. And he's going to feed off of that, and it's going to become something new. This is all oral culture. This is all the dynamism that you can find in oral culture. Now, as Laura showed us in the history of the progress of this, she said it was first written in Arabic in the early 1800s. Okay.
13.
What? Written.
Oh,
Composed centuries before that. If we were in the 1800s, we wouldn't be covering it in this class, that's for damn sure. This text, as it were, existed in the oral tradition for many centuries before anybody ever tried to write it down. It was not allowed by the people who knew it. They were not allowed to write it down for quite a while because they wanted to keep it dynamic. They wanted to keep that involvement. They wanted to keep it a live-only event. Once you write something down, you tend to limit it. Here, I think it helps for our understanding to just appreciate, and we don't necessarily have to flip back and forth constantly between the two versions. Either one is fine, but just understand that there are going to be differences throughout. Little things are going to crop up. When these were performed, people can change the story. Like any game of telephone, every time somebody repeats a story back that they just heard, there are going to be little changes here and there. And sometimes those little idiosyncrasies crop up in the telling. And sometimes there are little logical gaps, like, how did that come up? An oral tradition means that you have what is known as an unstable text. Everything is going to be a little shifty. Understanding this gives you the opportunity to start to draw some connections and start to assert a perspective on what you're seeing. Because we have seen some instabilities in other texts. We have seen some call and response in other texts. We have seen many things going on in other things we have read this semester. And understanding that gives us a perspective on this, because they're doing a lot of the same things, they're just doing it in a different way. Understanding that gives us an angle into it. So it's not just what they're doing stuff, this is all very foreign to me. It's not foreign. Certain aspects of it are foreign, but the whole is actually familiar when we start to draw some connections. We have seen unstable oral tradition text in Genesis. A careful reading of Genesis tells you that man was created twice. A careful reading, what?
The first man and the woman? Like what?
What? Yeah. If you read that, and I alluded to it when we spoke about it, but there are two creation stories there. If you read the story of Noah's Ark, a little bit past where we stopped in Genesis, there are two stories of Noah's Ark. At one point, they talk about how there are two animals. Animals enter 2 by 2, and there's a pair of each different kind of animal, every kind of animal on Earth. At another point, it says that there were, in fact, 7 pairs of every kind of animal on Earth, which starts to really get astronomical with the numbers pretty fast. But there are differences throughout. It's an unstable text. You can see other patterns in other kinds of works. Gilgamesh has several different versions, because we're dealing with stuff that was written on tablets, and the tablets tend to get crumbly, and there are gaps in the story. Sometimes there are only 9 tablets that people go off of and consider authoritative, and other times they factor in another one. Depends on which one you really want to believe, when you think that, well, no, this is the authorized version of it. Well, no, we don't know the author. We can't authorize anything. The story you want to hear is the one that you can dig out of the ground and discard the details you don't like. You can see you can see stories of, we saw at one point Sunjata goes off to, I forget where he went. I forget the name of the place. But basically, he has to escape, and he goes into exile. And we have seen many pieces about exile. Sinuhe being one of them. Character finds that he is in danger, and he runs off to a foreign land, grows to a greater understanding of himself and his culture, and eventually returns, often for the better. You can say pretty clearly, I think, that Dante's Inferno is an awful lot about being an exile in there. Dante's wandering around because he is exiled. Genji, at one point, has to escape the capital and go off and live in the hinterlands, a palace with only a few hundred servants. Oh my God, the scandal. These familiarities start to crop up. These parallels start to shed light on one another. Sunjata is the story of the founding of an empire. not unlike Beowulf and Gilgamesh. It's also about the establishment of a ruler. This is about celebrating Sunjata as a king. Which we saw on the very first day with the hymn to Aten. But also certainly Gilgamesh applies. Sinuhe is, in its own way, about celebrating the king, the pharaoh, who welcomed Sinuhe back. Genji is, in its own way, about celebrating the imperial rule. These aspects of it are all there. We can start to see the parallels, we can start to see the comparisons, we can start to understand like, oh, okay, they're kind of working with a lot of familiar tropes. Now, it's no mystery why, as Laura pointed out, you can see a Disney movie in this story. They're dealing with very familiar outlines, very familiar tropes, very familiar conventions of these stories. You can go through all of this and find analogs to Disney's Lion King. Little Simba is born to a father. He is celebrated from birth. His father dies. Simba has to grow up on his own in a dangerous wilderness. He has to learn something about himself there and then come back from that experience to something even more challenging, but one that will prove why he and he alone is the true leader, is the rightful heir to his father's greatness, and in fact, exceeds it.
You can see it in almost every Hollywood movie.
Hollywood is not original. Hollywood is trying to remake this story again and again and again. And in fact, you want to talk Hollywood for a minute? When this movie was in development, there was a you can look this up, and I'm blanking on the name of whoever wrote it, but I think he wrote a book later. There was a guy in Hollywood who wrote a short memo to producers and Hollywood types about outlining what a good classical mythic story contains. And for the most part, they this little short term paper he wrote essentially just summarized the theories of a scholar named Joseph Campbell, who was active for many years in the mid 20th century, and then he got very popular at the end of his life when George Lucas became a fan of his and then started making Star Wars movies, which doubled many of these same conventions. Basic story of how a hero develops. And Hollywood took notice. They couldn't argue with the success of Star Wars, and so they started mass producing this kind of adventure. But it's all the same story. They move certain things around Campbell's ideas themselves have come under some attack in the last few years. But the idea is that it's all familiar. It's not that foreign. Understanding that gives you a little bit of an advantage, because once you can see the conventions that they're working with here, once you can see the tricks of the trade that they're working within, the game they are playing, then you can really make an informed judgment about the work itself. You don't have to be just, confused by, I don't know what's going on here. It's not all foreign. There are some specifics in there that are idiosyncratic to this particular culture that are very individualized and great in their own way, but the format itself is perfectly recognizable. All right, I don't want to get too specific off the bat. Let me see here. So, Hari, did you have something that you want to just offer up? You want to tell us the story?
Yeah, I can tell you just the story.
Tell me the story, and we will talk about it.
So,
And then I will slowly, over time, rope in the rest of you.
okay, so it started when the Mansa of Menden, he tried to find his royal son, the next heir, to replace him. So just got married with everything he could. He went to his prophets to ask for the next heir, and they told him you need to marry 10 white girls, 10 mulatto, 10 black slaves, and so on and so on. And it didn't have any results. He was frustrated, and then he was told that a man would, from the skin white would pray for him and will give him the next heir. Then someone by the name Mejen Beretta, he was the man of the skin white. He told him that this prophet that he provide you a woman and she will provide you the next heir. In the next chapter, we know about the two hunters that arrived to Menden. Two hunters are brothers. They came from Morocco. I don't really know how Morocco is considered to be a country with a white skin, because Morocco is pretty much mulatto, white. They have all the colors, so I didn't really have that connection, how that's contained the prophet. I got family from Morocco. I'm like a quarter of it, and all the guys from Morocco, they're pretty dark.
The ethnography
like
is going to
pop-up.
shift over time, and you can't look at this as perfect history, certainly.
Yeah, so I just didn't really make the connection over here. And,
But very good. You're pushing back and saying, well, now wait a minute. They seem to be changing. This is deviating from what I know to be true. The ethnic stereotype is a little bit different here than what I know in reality. What does that say? Does this mean that they are sort of, are they, how accurate is this portrayal? Should I doubt it? Are they coming to it with a bit of an agenda? Are they trying to set up, they're clearly setting up some sort of a racial distinction among the different skin tones. And what are they trying to say with that? Because once you get a little bit of foothold where you can say, that isn't my experience, when you have, again, what's going on? This is different. Why? Once you can assert that, once you can say, why is this like it is? Why did they make this choice to say it this way? Did they couch it in these terms? That means you're on the right path, because you're making a critical distinction and you're objectifying this and demanding that it meet your standard of logic, not just its own. Very good. Sorry, keep going.
Okay, so the brothers, which is the second chapter, has no connection to the first chapter. The brothers are Abudu Karimi and Abudu Kasimu, which after they killed the buffalo later on chapter 6, they changed their name to the Mansa, Walanba, and Walani. I don't know why they changed the name. It says that the translation of their new name is the one who killed the buffalo. So they created an infinite prize for themselves. So everyone will speak to them as the one that killed the buffalo. So nobody will ever forget it.
Well, okay, let's.
They won like how can I say it? Infinite life. In the history.
Right. Immortality.
Yeah, immortality. Yeah, that's the word that I was looking for. And they are related to the Prophet Muhammad, which is like the father of the Islam.
Yes. Hold on 1 second. Two things. One, they're interested in immortality, as you just said. That's familiar.
Yeah.
Who else wants immortality? Quite a few people. This has been a recurrent theme. This is a frequent trope of great literature in the ancient and not so ancient era. But also something else you said about how it was a little bit confusing why their name suddenly changed. They became known as something different once they had done something.
But
and this
we
is
haven't got to it. It's like it's going to be later on.
Right, but at this particular point, their names change, and you're just expected to know, and you're supposed to be able to follow along. Now, this tells you a couple of things. First of all, it is a convention in some traditions of literature where characters do change their names. I spoke at the time when we were reading Genji that a lot of the characters in there, their names will suddenly become something different. They will be promoted because
the rank.
Yeah, they're always identified by their rank more than the person. And so when they start talking about this other person, you have to realize that, oh no, that's actually the same person. And from that, what you do is, you start asking questions. Well, what does that tell me about that? In Genji, I would argue that when people are identified by their rank, it tells you a little something about the power of, or the value of individuality in a large organization like an imperial palace, an imperial administration. If you are known as your job, that's your whole identity in a large bureaucracy. Here, you are known by what you did. These two brothers killed the buffalo.
By the way, like Genesis, that Cain walked with a Cain letter on his forehead because he killed his brother, so it's kind of the same.
The mark of Cain, yeah. These are all different ways of identifying people that you can draw conclusions about. If you have the stomach to just say, well, that doesn't make sense, why would they do that? And once you can say that, you might be totally wrong about what you're, supposing, but if you can start to make connections and say, well, okay, I have seen in the past where, characters change their names, and it doesn't make any sense at first, but there are reasons for it. And I might not personally know what they are, but if I know that this has been done in the past in other contexts, I can say, well, all right, it's not just a fluke, it's not just something, out of the blue. This is something with some significance. Maybe I just need to spend a little time digging into that and figuring that out. These are all practices of reading that get easier with more experience. The more you read, the more understanding you have that other books, other texts do different things. And when it becomes more familiar, it becomes easier to recognize and get into because you're not so put off by it. The first time you read a story, once upon a time, wait a minute, this all happened a long time ago? What sense does that make? I'm only interested in stuff that happens right now. Once you understand that literature is often about stuff that happens in the past, that becomes a convention, and you're not so shocked by it the next time you read a story. It's just about what you're used to. So becoming more used to stuff over time by exposing yourself to much, it makes the experience richer because you can draw more out of it. Sorry. Tell me about the Buffalo Woman and the adventure with her.
So the Buffalo Woman, they were looking for her for a whole chapter. They went through a few women in order to ask some questions where they can find her. And nobody told them an answer until she suddenly reveals in the shape of a woman. So it already tells you that in the story people can transform themselves. We can see it a lot of the story. That people can transform themselves into animals. And they made a deal with her. She told them, you know what, I'm gonna let you kill me, but in 3 terms. She wanted a proper burial. You can see it on many stories over here that the burial considered to be a very important act to do after. Some say that that's the door to the next life. Without a proper burial, you were always stuck in this on Earth, on this world. So that's probably the reason she asked for it. She also asked for them to take Sankota, future mother. She was twisted. She was a kind of crippled, as Sankota was until he was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason she asked for it was because she made her to be in this situation. She spoke about some magic mask. We don't know that that's a part of the Lilu of her that she has.
Right.
But that's a clue that there is some magic items in the story. It's like it's built their own themes.
Mm-hmm.
And she also said that you shouldn't take the buffalo out of town. But she also said after the 3rd term, she said that you don't have to fulfill it, which is pretty weird because she gave them 3 terms and then they said nobody will believe us if we won't take your body, and then she said, you know what, never mind. That's pretty weird, and it's been written like never mind.
Yeah.
2 words, 3 words. And she gave them a magical dagger to stab her when she's gonna be a buffalo. The next chapter we can see it's called the death of the buffalo. By the way, each chapter tells you exactly what you're gonna see, what you're gonna read it in.
Well, some of that, very frequently,
You can read
different
only
versions of it will give you little breaks where the editors will jump in and try and fill in some blanks. And that's important to know because that is not necessarily the text, but that is that's the editors trying to make it easier and more accessible for people who are new to this particular tradition.
I think, like you said, that at first place for 500 years, this story was passing through a year.
Right.
It's much easier to remember it when you give a title that is exactly the same thing you're going to read at the text itself.
Yeah, the editors are trying to make it more accessible. They're trying to make it a little bit easier to follow because they understand that there are some difficulties. Louis.
Professor, I also have a resume of the story.
Okay, we're going to get to you in 1 second. What you said about the body, the burial of the body, is significant, and because you mentioned that, we have seen concerns about this before. Sinue is remarkably concerned with his own funeral, the treatment of his body after death. The Iliad is the Iliad has its climactic confrontation between Hector and Achilles, and it is about the desecration of Hector's body, and that's how the whole thing turns at the end. Let me see. Yeah, Gilgamesh has some issue. What's that?
Beowulf.
Beowulf has the funeral at the end.
Right.
Gilgamesh has concern about the funeral with Enkidu. This is a regular convention, but it's doing something else here that I would say is closer to Beowulf than to Gilgamesh. You have this old woman who, not necessarily that old, but this woman who transforms by magic into a buffalo, a beast. Magic.
Yeah, and she steals all the gold and silver, which is exactly like the dragon out of Beowulf.
It's exactly like the dragon. It's also, quite frankly, like the bull of heaven in Gilgamesh. And in a way, it's kind of like Gilgamesh himself. The beast wandering through civilization, wrecking everything. The magical woman needs to be killed, essentially. She needs to be taken out. And the two heroes who step forward are doing it for particular reasons. Now, first of all, I will point out there is a problem introduced with this woman. The buffalo is ruining stuff. And then a hero steps forward, which is what happens in every Hollywood movie ever. You're introduced to a problem, then the hero steps forward and says, "Damn it, I'll take it. I can do this." And so again, a convention. Very obvious. Yes, Anastasia.
I just wanted to mention that the reason why she did all this not out of nowhere. Like, she had a problem with her brother, and he didn't want to share the legacy with her.
Yeah.
And I think the reason also being mentioned, like, she's saying, "Oh, the woman cannot have property." And
Yeah.
she gets mad because of that.
There is family strife. There is inherent sexism. There are a lot of familiar themes that are getting kicked up that we have seen play out over and over and over again. She has her very clear motivations. So do they. Why do they go and agree to kill her?
In the first place, they wanted to marry the king's one of the king's wives, because he offered one of his 333 wives to the one gonna kill the buffalo.
Yeah.
So that's the reason they went over there at the first place. But then she changed her mind with the terms and with the gold. She said that her tail is full of gold and silver and treasures from all over.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
She kind of bought him.
There was a little bit of a transaction there. But I will point to, and here I'm not sure where it is in the third edition. On my fourth edition, page 18, one of the brothers, Abdul Karimi, replied, "If the buffalo kills us," the line right before that. The elder brother said, "Hey, little brother," which is very informal. I like that. "Hey, little brother. Hey, little brother, what about these things they are talking about? Suppose the buffalo kills us. Prudent." Abdul Karimi replied, if the buffalo kills us, at least we'll die for the sake of the Conde. They are having a bad time in Donikiri. I feel bad for them."
I think they also wanted to fame. Because after they killed, like, the older brother say, "Oh, the younger brother, you gave me, like, you established my name," or something like that.
Right. But in the actual words that are there right now, they get to fame. That is a big thing. But initially, I feel bad for them. Empathy. It says it in the text. They say, I feel bad for them. I am feeling empathy. They are different than I am. They are of a different tribe. But I have heard their story and I feel bad for them. Now, this points us to some of the differences we saw in Beowulf. Beowulf was a traditional story that had existed orally, largely, for some time into the pagan European past. There are a lot of Germanic pagan elements kicking around there. And then it is generally agreed by scholars that it became overlaid or infused with Christian principles because the culture was Christianizing at that period. And so the story was adapted to show Christian principles. And in it, I was at some pains to point out, the story is largely driven by this impulse to couch the barbaric past as an encumbrance, as something that the culture needs to leave behind and move on to the now revealed truth of Christianity. And much the same thing, I think, is happening here. Because the buffalo woman is a spirit of magic. She can do old traditional things. Her concern with her funeral or with the treatment of her body is born out of a lot of traditional beliefs about death and the preservation of the body and desecration and stuff we don't really need to go into in specific, but she is a kind of embodiment of the old-time beliefs. So who comes forward? These two heroes who are associated at a couple of points that I'm not going to get into, but associated with certain Muslim beliefs and practices. They are coming, they're essentially traders from out of town, and this is more or less how Islam spread. It had been spreading for hundreds of years throughout Africa and Arabia at this point, but it was just starting to push into Western Africa and penetrate not just the cities where they really started to historically get a hold, but out into the provinces and the hinterlands. Throughout history, great change tends to happen first in cities when people get a hold of ideas that change them, and those same ideas tend to meet with resistance out in the boondocks. And that's kind of where we are with this. These two traders come across and say, we want to do this for empathy. We feel bad about it. That automatically casts them as the good guys, hero/good guys, but it also means that they are introducing a new moral framework into this region. They are taking the barbarity of people who do magic, old spiritualist pagan beliefs, and they are introducing a kind of universalist moral framework that is Islam. Islam was a largely universalist approach. It's one of the reasons it spread so well. throughout that whole region because it scooped up everybody. It was pliable enough to incorporate many different beliefs, many different kinds of people, and they could even negotiate a little bit in terms of how strict it was. It was very decentralized that way. But I don't want to get too into that. What I just want you to take away at this moment is they are the change agent. She is the old-fashioned, the old way of doing things on a symbolic level. And since they are operating with very familiar conventions of epics, where, yeah, you can have people who change shape all the time. We have seen that in some cases before. That's how you can judge it. Okay, they're playing by this set of rules. I know some of those rules. Let's see how they do. Luis, what happens next?
So they kill the buffalo. I must explain how they kill the buffalo. So basically, to kill the buffalo, they put the staff in the spindle and shoot the buffalo right in the chest. And after that, the buffalo were chasing them, and they throw the hot charcoal to put out fire. So after the fire was gone, the buffalo jumped into the ashes and keep chasing the two heroes. They went to the lake and throw the egg that makes the ground into deep mud, and then the buffalo got trapped and died. They took the tail, that was pure gold, and that was also the way to show that they killed the buffalo. In the session, Solomon ruling Conde of Durikiri. After they killed the buffalo, all the 22 village got together and brought all the girls to marry the brothers, but there was one missing, and it was Solomon. The brother asked to bring her out, and they chose her as they have promised to the buffalo woman. After that, they offered it to Macan Compara, and Solomon was still virgin. They got married, and after a month, Solomon became pregnant, and that's how Sunjata was conceived.
Okay. What was the Buffalo Woman's request about the marriage?
She was like, don't marry the beautiful girls. Instead, marry my father, last born. She's very ugly, and her name is Solomon Gulen Conde.
Yeah, marry the ugly girl. What do you think they meant by that?
By marrying her?
Yeah, why marry the ugly one? Because that's all we really know about her at first. She turns out to be a remarkable character, but she is introduced to us as, well, she's the ugly one. There are all these other women that they are offered. All of these great tribal fathers come out and say, marry my daughter as a sign of gratitude of our tribe to you. And, you know, all of these beautiful girls are brought out. Anyone you want, take your pick. Let's have a pageant. But they're supposed to marry the ugly one. And that's all we know about her. Why?
I guess because the buffalo woman basically made her ugly, because I guess when she was little, she dropped him and broke her ribs. I mean, her ribs. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little story about the back thing.
And all about that. And also, she has a strong Dalilu. So I
Magic.
that's the key point.
Yeah.
And that's why they offer it to the Conde, so he can have his foreseeing kid that he's been looking for.
Okay, yeah. She has magic, which we have already discussed, equals a kind of traditional value in this civilization. And she is supposed to get married to one of these two brothers who represent the newer civilization. So, let's say, new. So, he would be a product of these two impulses, the old and the new. And this is the person that we know is supposed to go on and found the empire. A product of the traditional way of doing things and the new understanding sweeping the land. But it's more than that. Because again, that's all what we're told a little bit down the line. Now everybody hearing this in an audience, of course, would know the story 1,000 different ways. But they're going to know the basics of it. So you have to understand that they can see down into the future in a way that we can't. But at this point, we are only hearing the word ugly. Why? I ask again, why anyone? Why choose the ugly girl? Gotta give hope to the readers? Sure, for the ugly people in the audience. Hey, you throw them a bone, literally. Sarah.
When they're like describing what Dalu is, they said that it's like the mother's physical deformity signal that there's like that like her child would have special powers. So maybe it's like kind of like you have to make her ugly so that like she fits into like having Dalu.
Maybe, yeah. Again, I can think of many traditions where people who do magic, witches, tend to be old, ugly types. There's a certain suspicion of anybody who's physically deformed in any way. But just on a more basic level, it sounds like advice your grandmother would give you. Go find a nice homely girl. There's no fuss. They're not concerned with the latest fashion. They're not spending all your money going out and buying new dresses and makeup and having their hair done and all of that stuff. Get yourself a homely girl who will build a good home. Right?
Where's the self-esteem?
What's that?
Where's the self-esteem?
Where is the self-esteem? Yes, okay. But we're going to push that off into the realm of not quite historically accurate just yet. Ugly is a superficial judgment. Ugly means you're not blinded by beauty. Ugly means you have to look for value inside. Ugly means there's more than meets the eye. Don't trust appearances. Don't be fooled. Read carefully into every situation so you know the true value of what's going on. It's good literary advice, it's good life advice. What happens next?
After that, the Kura to Man, I think that the eldest brother, he wanted to kill Sunjata, and he thought Sunjata was sleeping, and got the 7 young men and started hitting the person in the head until he was dead, thinking it was Sunjata, but Sunjata had went to hunt. And after that, Sologon and Sujata went to exile. Sologon.
Hold on, I want to stop and back up actually for a minute. I just realized I skipped over something kind of important. Sarah in the back, how you doing? Good. Oh, let's see if we can change that. What translation, what edition are you working with? 3rd or 4th? 4th. Okay, turn to page 27. A childhood of Man Sunjata. First thing, just a little bit towards the top, you see Then what did he do for them? Through sorcery, they stretched the tendons of his feet. They lamed him and forced him to crawl on the ground for one year. Whom are they speaking of here?
Wait, where?
The top of page 27.
They're speaking of
They're talking about Sunjata, aren't they?
What's that?
They're talking about Sunjata?
Yeah.
Because you can't walk, so then I think it says that for the first 7 years of his life he couldn't walk, so then like the king's like co-wives were kind of making fun of his mother, and like she asked him a favor, I think, to get like baobab leaves or something. Baobab leaves. And then they kind of like
It's a significant tree, a significant plant in the culture. Significant plant kind of reminds you of Gilgamesh and also Genesis. Just saying there. The other moms of, it's a polygamous culture. All of these great tribal leaders could afford many, many wives. And so when you have many, many wives, they can have many, 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 many children. And, well, it tends to be only the first wife that gets to have the next king. And what happens to all of the other wives and all of their other children? What happens to them?
they're kind of like forgotten about.
Forgotten about. Kind of like Genji, yes. You have a number of jealous women, troublesome women, they always start all the problems. Troublesome women who are going around scheming about how to, literally in this case, cripple the rival to their own children. And in this case, they are doing it quite brutally. They lamed him and forced him to crawl on the ground for 1 year. They did this by stretching the tendons of his 2 feet. I don't know exactly what that is, but it sounds pretty excruciating.
They made him to be in this situation.
Yeah.
They created him, kind of.
They did, but now they're trying to essentially undercut him. They're trying to make sure that he cannot lead so that maybe their little golden boys can.
Still relevant today.
Still very relevant today. But I will point out one other aspect of this. It is a particularly brutal rivalry. It is carried out by all of these troublesome busybody mommies. All of these bad women. And they are all lining up against the one good woman. Sogalan, or Soligan. I don't know. I'm terrible with names. But Sunjata's mom is cast as the good woman. There's one. Generally speaking, all the rest of the women in the story are different shades of terrible. Torturing an infant here. Just all of the pretty girls that, I'm pretty, pick me. Cast as a negative stereotype. You see one woman held up above all others. Everybody else is terrible. Very much like Genji. You can make a pretty good argument that in Inferno, Beatrice is the one woman who is perfect. And then he meets an awful lot of others who, less so. So these patterns are recurring again. You can see also in this translation, Sarah, then what did they do to him? Through sorcery, the bad women are associated with witchcraft. They stretched the tendons of his 2 feet. They lamed him and forced him to walk on the ground for 1 year. And then what does it say after that, Sarah?
2 years,
And what does it say after that?
3 years,
And after that?
4 years,
And after that?
5,
And after that?
6.
It's fairly predictable to anybody who knows how to count, but you can see this call and response thing again. Driving home the point, but also involving the crowd. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. He's working the crowd here. It's no different than when a stand-up comic jumps on stage and says, "Hey, how about another round of applause for the last guy who's funnier than I am?" And they get the round of applause. It involves everybody. It riles them up. It moves the thing, the spirit along, if not the momentum of the plot. Cheesy little oral tradition stuff there.